What incredible inspiration we have already received and heard and taken part in so far. And in this smaller talk, I hope to share with you another aspect of what can inspire the Theosophical Society. It is the very concept, but more than the concept, the actual experience of global consciousness. And in case you're wondering where this might come from, we have that phrase used by the auspicious Boris de Zirkov, who was a grandnephew of HPB, and also the editor of her massive collected writings, which, if anybody knows, is about this much of books across a shelf. So he was a pretty iconic man. And this is what he wrote. We are living in an age of tremendous opportunities for all of us. Today, nothing can withstand the dynamic spiritual push which is working from behind the scenes on outward human events. We must understand the causes at work and realize that they are spiritual in nature. The book of life, he continued, is opened at a new chapter. Across the page there runs in flaming letters the heading Global Consciousness. And it tells of the irresistible drive of evolution towards a living brotherhood of the human race. If that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. But that's where he had that vision. He caught that vision of the possibility of global consciousness, not just way off in the maybe one day, but that its time is arriving. Its beginning is here with us. This connects also with the vision of the Mahatmas, the wonderful quotes we've already heard from the Mahatma letters, where one of them wrote, "The term universal brotherhood is no idle phrase. Humanity in the mass has a paramount claim on us. It is the only secure foundation for a universal morality." And he went on with other parts of that quote too. Humanity in the mass is the primary concern of the Mahatmas, the great ones, those who have attained as spiritual beings of light and enlightenment. They didn't want to be feeding the curiosity of a few well-off Europeans in their drawing rooms with their feet up, probably smoking their pipes. I am adding a few things that aren't in the Mahatma letters. But you do get this idea of privileged Victorians saying, "Oh, what's that about the astral bell? Astral bell, how do you do that? How do you get those roots to grow through the handle of that cup?" No. Whilst they wanted to feed the spiritual growth of everybody, they didn't want the tears to be the exclusive domain of the privileged few to pursue their self-oriented discoveries. In fact, they finished that quote with the words, "Rather perish the Theosophical Society with its founders than it become this kind of organisation." So it was the massive humanity that they had their vision for. And that, I believe, provides the context for our work in the Theosophical Society. It is primarily why we're here. Now you might think, oh, but how are we going to contact nearly 8,000 million people on the earth, even in this age of Facebook, etc., etc. Lots of people are not on Facebook. But I think there are possibilities where if we let loose the uplifting influences and inspire key people, it can propagate like a ripple in a pool and spread from person to person. So I do believe we have power way beyond our numbers. So most people then would think, well, I can feel care and compassion towards my family and perhaps a few of the people I work with, but again, how could I possibly achieve a globally reaching compassion? Well, again, there's hope. Albert Schweitzer, the great man who worked in Africa and did a wonderful work there. My question to you is, how can we feel we could extend our care and compassion towards other people? And Albert Schweitzer answered that question by saying, until he extends the circle of his compassion to all living things, man will not himself find peace. Now Einstein, the great Albert Einstein, in a slightly longer quote wrote, human beings suffer from a kind of optical delusion of consciousness, a prison, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few people nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So those two great men conceived this phrase, or this concept, of expanding our circle of compassion. Again, how was not directly answered, but that's the challenge once again. Global consciousness, expand circle of compassion. Well, you might think, what is this global consciousness? What could be the signs of it arising? And there are many. First of all, we had the internet itself, which in a way is like a replica of the global brain. In fact, there's a book being written with the title Global Brain. And it's providing a way for people to connect in communities, not only their physical neighbours, but also now people of kindred interests. So you can have groupings of people with the same interest. So if it turns out that you had a passion for breeding pink fluffy guinea pigs, just to pick something a bit exotic, even pink fluffy cats, he said, looking at somebody who should go nameless in the front. So, me too. You could find now potentially on the internet other people with that same interest, and they might well be in England and India or Africa, whatever it is. So this is one of the great liberating aspects of the internet, which it does allow the possibility that people of a kindred interest to discover each other and share their passions, their interest and inspiration. So here we have the vital concept of networks of communication, networks of grace, is a wonderful phrase, communities of shared interest. So what else? An interest of mine, which I won't go into though, is of new money systems. They actually aren't new, they're actually old. And at the times in history when they were used, people flourished in their communities, like built huge cathedrals in Europe. So why I'm sharing this is that it's a way of relating to each other in community, which doesn't have the heavy hand of debt, which our present money system enforces. So that's another possibility, and I know that lots of community efforts are growing up around the world here now in that avenue. Very inspiring efforts they are too. Now we've heard a bit about values now, and there is a pronounced shift, a global-wide shift of values of humankind, and I won't describe what they are, but they could be towards more respect for integrity, love, compassion, truthfulness. They're different things, aren't they? Truthfulness, and many other values like that too. And people have done scientific surveys on the general groupings of values in society, mostly in the Western world, but this is what I am sharing from. I suspect it's also happening in other cultures as well. Big shifts, which probably is why around about the 1960s, anybody who was living through that period might recall the generation gap, which is like a quantum leap of values and concerns, flower power, all these things that sprang up, especially in America, but other places too. It wasn't just an evolutionary change of values, it was like a huge leap, as I say. And many a parent was bewildered by the manifestations of their children. There's a wonderful picture of a girl, well, a young woman, incredibly brave she must have been, probably in a demonstration, holding a single flower, and she is walking towards a row of armed men with their rifles up. And here's this guy with a heavy helmet and the riot shield, he's just defended up to the, heavy armour with probably tanks nearby. And this wonderful woman is just going up and she's placing this flower ever so gently down into the muzzle of that rifle. And I thought, oh, thank you for that. It was just so cool that she could do that. And spiritual power actually is more powerful than the worldly power. That doesn't mean to say it's going to overcome instantly. Another shift that's apparent is the wide move over the last about 2 or 3 decades towards flatter, organisations. Now, what I'm talking about is businesses. When you, in the past, had a very hierarchical command structure like the army, what the boss says goes. It's called line command, if you read about management, line command economy or organisations. There's a great flattening underway right now, and this includes, to quite a degree, the Theosophical Society itself. And the shift here is towards people not wanting to be so much told what to do at the lower levels, the people who do this stuff, but they want to take part in the decisions. And people who used to be bosses are more wanting to take part. So it's more towards a collaborative process. People want to participate. And that's a tremendous global shift in organisations today. There's also a rising of group consciousness and groups, group consciousness and groups. Really important that people working together in a group begin to find they're speaking for the group ethos, the group mentality. And that's a wonderful thing when you experience it. There's the rise of a group of younger people, mostly, not entirely, who are again the result of research called the cultural creatives. And in brief, a chap called Paul Ryan researched the groupings of values in society back in 1995, the mid-80s I think it was. Then he did it again about 10 years later. And he found that a certain group of people who cared for the earth, had spiritual values, respected relationships, were about 25% of the population when he first did the research. They'd risen to over a third when he came back to that research, which means if that trend carries on, we're heading towards that kind of person comprising half the population. Anyway, it excites me. Large numbers of worldwide meditations. Now, who remembers the first one perhaps in 2007? Fire the Grid. Anybody take part in the Fire the Grid? Yeah, one or two hands have gone up. 5 million people, no less, went to that website and I believe took part in that meditation, as I did myself. Now there are probably a dozen such meditations around the world. What's happening? This is just awesome. And the noosphere, that wonderful scientist mystic, Teilhard de Chardin, conceived the idea of the sphere of consciousness around the earth itself. And, surprise, surprise, the Global Consciousness Project itself, which is an effort of certain scientists. The Global Consciousness Project, if you're interested, look it up on the internet. And they're trying to discover the way that mass experiences of human emotion can be detected by equipment and by electronic equipment. And yeah, they are finding remarkable changes, like when the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York in 9/11, 2001. They found that the graph of the signals, I don't want to go into the science because there isn't time, the graph of the signals out of these detectors spread around the world began to change very, very distinctly from the general trend. And what was interesting, that trend began about an hour before the planes hit the towers. So the Global Consciousness Project itself is extremely interesting. So there's a lot of different manifestations, as I believe, which are profound evidence of a shift and of a trend towards a global consciousness. We are clearly not yet there. With the number of wars, you said there were no less than 60 wars going on Earth right now. Well, heaven help us. Although I am inclined to think that this now is a time of rapidly speeding up shift of consciousness, and that the dark stuff that's been buried so long through our history, the terrible battlefields, I know psychically aware people who will describe the terrible energies left behind at every battlefield. Well, Mother Earth herself has had these awful desecrations, countless battles of people dying in agony, bleeding themselves out alone in a field. Well, I think that is coming to the surface now. And the spiritual, I believe, although it's a really challenging time now, it is challenge time. We need everybody who wants to work for the side of the light. At the same time, I believe it will be triumphant. So with the remaining time I have, I want to talk about, first of all, individual experience, the way the working of the spiritual part of ourselves can be profoundly transformative, because that is the core in a way. I mean, I know the Spirit wells up in groups and big groups, and I think worldwide too, with the help of the Masters and the light and energy that they pour forth. But let's look at the individual. There are a number of very visible methods or processes now by which people are having totally transformative experiences. And one of them is the near-death experience, where there are whole websites with thousands of different accounts of people. Not everyone is transformative. Quite a proportion of them are not inspiring, and a small fraction are rather negative. But I actually think that those negative experiences are like people who jump willy-nilly into a drug experience without any idea of the need for self-purification, or indeed any spiritual process. For example, a Vipassana weekend or 10 days of Vipassana, you either run screaming from it in the middle, or you come through the challenges a cleaner and clearer person. So I'm talking about these things which are now exploding into global awareness, near-death experience. But there are other ways. There's meditation itself, and history is filled with examples of the mystics. But hey, we can have transformative experiences in the course of our meditations as well. Okay, we might have 100 meditations that are, oh golly, my mind is wandering, this monkey mind, does my monkey have to be so determined about this wandering? And then one day, silence may descend and a moment of grace ensues, and the monkey mind says, okay, I know that's it, all right, I'll shut up now. And in that time of grace, it might be 5 seconds, it might be 5 minutes, or indeed longer. It changes you. And next day you might engage in your meditation, you think, oh God, there's that monkey again, But the monkey is a bit cowed. The monkey says, right, okay, all right, I know there's a transcending power which can come and just embrace me as a little old monkey, but just transform the meaning of this whole experience. So that's near-death experiences, meditations themselves. There are all sorts of ways this happens. So the near-death experience, as I mentioned, has all these websites, but others as well. There's after-death communications. There's a wonderful story of a lady whose husband died suddenly. And she experienced his voice in her ear the next day or two, and he was clearly saying, look for the money in my pocket. She had no idea what he was talking about, because they hadn't talked about money, but she thought, well, may as well. So she fished around his jacket pocket. There was $300. He had been going to bank that, but he died before he got to the bank. And again, there are hundreds of these examples on the internet. Hey, the ancient wisdom it used to be taught in the mystery schools, and they were preserved because they might have been dangerous, perhaps escaping out to the going feral. But now this ancient sacred wisdom is just getting out there big time, filling our world and our consciousness. So, the Master says here's a wonderful further quote, talking about the supremacy and the possibility of this love for all humanity. And this Master writes, we've been talking about the progression of love, the way we experience compassion, like that expanding circle of compassion. He'd been talking about that possibility of the sequence. But he says then, to crown all, blood ties, friendship, patriotism and race predilections, all will give way to become blended into one universal feeling, the only true and holy, the only unselfish and eternal one, love, an immense love for humanity as a whole. For it is humanity which is the great orphan. And the Master describes further that image. We had a touch of it the other night. The image here is of the story, the fable, where this being or this person in the fable, their limbs are at war with each other. The left arm is saying, you're evil, you're a right arm, you need to be a left one to be any good, you know. Imagine all the conversations, and I tell you, you get this garbage on Facebook too. Just reflecting human nature. The terrible, terrible battles if our consciousness was leavened with the spiritual light we're talking about and the ways it can and does happen. It will begin to float all that off to the surface, to float away like a scum and disappear. So that is a wonderful quote. That's another master's take on this global love, this global consciousness, as a great and inspiring possibility. But what about our love for our family? I mean, what about my blood ties? What about my dear mother, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever? No, it's like this. It's like having a candle burning overnight, which is great. You know, you might have needed that candle in the dark, but as the light begins to rise in the sky and the sun dawns, oh my goodness, that candle is still burning. It's still giving its light. You can still honour it, but it gives way before the immensity, the brilliance of the sun. And that's my take on that particular saying. There's not saying to lose your love for those you're near to, because after all, the masters themselves, I understand in their personal lives and their personal vehicles, did have certain people that they were nearer to. But all they're saying really is that when the sun, S-U-N, of love arises, be prepared to experience that intensity of love for the few, again, in the expanding circle of consciousness and compassion, out to embrace the lot. This is my family. This is my planet, this beautiful blue jewel hanging in space. Believe me, we know there are thousands of exoplanets out there now too, so, you know, be prepared. Well, just a wee bit more. So now, yes, I believe that, I'm just trying to understand what I wrote. Yes, so this, I hope the video kernel will be edited. I'm banking on that. Please take out the human foibles. She is very good at that, and she's very experienced at doing that for me already. I love that, yeah, that's really cool. So this is where we're heading, I believe. We are heading this way, and the Theos itself is enmeshed in this rising of the tide, this tide of light, this tide of global consciousness. So I like to put it this way, that the root of altruism, one of Blavatsky's most favoured words, and compassion and goodwill, this consciousness, this transformative awareness that is the core of our being, and once we've touched it, transforms us. I like to say altruism is an affair of the heart, is it not? You know, and it might change from maybe initially an intellectual idea, you say, yeah, I like that, but as you blossom inwardly, in whatever way the Spirit moves within you, and I think it's in different sequence for each of us, isn't it? You know, those perhaps the intellect blossoms earlier and those in which the heart blossoms earlier, but that's all right. We have time to catch up with ourselves and each other in that. So let's recall once more Boris Dezerkov's stirring call. The book of life is opened at a new chapter. Across the page there runs in flaming letters the heading Global Consciousness, and it tells of the irresistible drive of evolution towards a living brotherhood of the human race. Now, Leadbeater remarked once that once a person has a glimpse of the mighty evolutionary plan of the universal life or the Logos or God, we cannot help but want to put our weight in behind it. Once you get that glimpse, and I think a lot of those people like Anita Moorjani and others who've had a transformative near-death experience, have experienced being in the ocean of love, and that changes them. And really, they just want everybody else to have that experience. Curiously, though, you need Theosophy to understand the Theosophical Society's purpose. It's kind of circular, but as we get the glimpse opens a door to a deeper understanding, and we can have the experience of reading a book which we thought was great 20 years ago or something, or 10, and come back to it and think, oh wow, there's a whole lot more to that than I realised before. That's okay. It's you that changed. The book didn't change. It's you that changed. This is what we're here for. We're here to grow and develop. So we have the need. This is now the combination and the relevance to the purpose of the Theosophical Society, we need to share these possibilities. It's expressed wonderfully by the Mahachohan in the Mahatma letters as to popularise the knowledge of Theosophy. But out of what we've been hearing just now, this knowledge is not merely intellectual, it is also heart knowledge. Think of the emotional quotient, the intelligence of the heart, the intelligence of the spirit. If we're going out there to popularise knowledge of Theosophy, let's make sure that we're trying to share the whole spectrum of the rainbow, not just the one colour, even though it's a brilliant colour. So that's the note I'd like to leave you on, and I think if we can just be inspired by Vic Hao Chin's inspirations and sharing about applied Theosophy and the others today, and bring all these currents of light to converge on our gatherings from this time together. Thank you, I've finished.